We enjoy cooking with mushrooms in our house, and mushrooms typically provide a nice substitute for meat. They provide a meatiness that you don't get from other things, plus there's a heartiness to it. It has that nice mouthfeel, and there's the umami that goes along with it. Umami is sort of that texture feel in your mouth. And I find that mushrooms do that pretty well. We use a lot of different kinds of mushrooms in my house, and one of the ones we've discovered recently are the orangi mushrooms. That's these guys. They're also called, I think, trumpet mushrooms is another word I've heard for them. And they come out like something like this. And they're really fun, and they're nice to work with, and they're really easy to use. And the cool thing about them is they shred, so you get some really interesting textures out of them, so you can use them in a lot of dishes where you might do some sort of pulled chicken or pulled pork. You can substitute these mushrooms in that dish for a very similar sort of texture, but they're so much better. So I'm gonna show you how we do some of that stuff, and let's take a try at this, and we're gonna use some of these mushrooms for a couple of dishes. The dish we're going to make is a mushroom taco that's going to be really good. The mushroom will replace any sort of meat that you might have in there, and will give it a lot of flavor. So we're going to add some onions to kind of get this started. So the pre-work is to just cut up an onion that we'll saute in a pan, and then we'll add the mushrooms to it. So we'll go ahead and do that first before we get anything else started. We'll get a little olive oil going in the pan, and we'll get the onion in there, and that'll get everything nice and toasty and started, and get a little aromatics going with just the onion. So this is a great place to start, and I really like having the onions sauteing while I start getting my mushrooms ready. So I get those going a little bit. They're going to start to cook up. We want to get them until they're just about brown. And when they're brown, we know that we're ready to move on. So we've gotten them started. We've got the pan ready. So now let's talk about our mushrooms. These orangi mushrooms are really interesting. They have an interesting shape to them. They're called trumpet mushrooms in some places. And the cool thing about them is that you can actually take them and use a fork to actually pull off shreds. So it looks like shredded chicken or shredded pork or something like that. And you can use it for a variety of different dishes. So as you can see, I'm just using the fork to pull it apart. How cool is this, that you can take a mushroom like this and start pulling shreds off of it, strips off of it that you can use in cooking? So this takes a couple of minutes to just shred up the mushrooms. I'm going to use about 3 of these that I'm going to use in my dish here. And I just kind of pull them apart a little bit. And the ends I'm going to cut up separately. And it sort of becomes a different texture in there. So there's my shreds that I can work with. I could slice them up a little more. I could use them in the whole piece like this. It really doesn't matter. The idea is just to start getting them going and getting them cooking. Now, one word of caution about the orangi mushroom. They do have a slight amount of toxicity to them, so you can't eat them raw. You have to actually cook them in some way. So what I like to do typically is I'll put them in the oven first and then bring them back and saute them. But in this recipe, I'm going to switch around and actually do the sauteing first and then put them in the oven to crisp them up just a little bit. But you can go either direction. It doesn't really matter. So now I've got my trumpet mushrooms all cut up. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some baby portobellos that I'm going to add into it too. I just want a little bit more flavor, so I'm going to take a few of these and just dice them up and put them in the mix. So they'll go along with everything I've got there and give it a little bit more flavor. I think it's kind of an important thing just to give a little more texture and flavor to this dish, that you have a nice mushroom feel to it. And it's got enough mushroom in it where it feels like it's really coming together as something that's meaty in a way and really kind of filling and satisfying. So I'll dice up a couple of these baby portobellos. We'll get those ready. We'll put them with the other mushrooms, and then we can continue our cooking process. So we'll just get those diced up a moment. They're really pretty cool. When you see this come together here, it looks pretty neat. So here's all my mushrooms, and then I'm going to take all my orangis and put them on top. So there you can see the shredded pieces. This is all I've cut up. This is my mushroom dish. This is going to be the base for what I'm making. So let's turn back to the onions for just a minute. Looks like they're starting to brown. They're getting ready, so we'll add some garlic to it. And so the next step is to get some garlic going in here to get a little bit more flavor happening in it. So we'll get the garlic, put about 2 tablespoons in there, and we'll get it, it's about maybe 3 cloves of garlic or so, and we'll get it going and just get it more brown. We'll continue browning it up just a little bit more to get a little more out of it. And you can smell the flavor starting to come out of it. You can really start to smell it as it's cooking like this. The aroma of it is great. Now we're going to add a few spices. Now you can vary the spices a little bit. I'm trying to go with a little bit of a Mexican flavor here. So I'm using a little bit of cumin and coriander, and then a little bit of chipotle, and some smoked paprika. I want to get a little smoky flavor to it, and that's why the chipotle and the smoked paprika are kind of important to me. But I could certainly add other spices if I wanted them. You can spice this a lot of different ways if you want to. So I'm going to get that mixed up. You can see that it's starting to brown and come out kind of nice here. And then we're going to add a few more ingredients to kind of get it going as we get things going. So we'll get some tomatoes in there, and that gives it a little bit of tomatoey flavor, a little acid to go along with it. The tomatoes just add a nice base to it. And then we're going to go ahead and add a little liquid smoke to continue on that flavor. of having a little smokiness to it. It just adds a little something extra when you have that smoky flavor to the mushrooms. I think it helps a lot. So we'll go ahead and mix that up, get it ready. Once that's kind of cooked up a little bit, then we can start adding our mushrooms in here. So our mushrooms are ready. That's the entirety of our mushrooms. The oranges, the baby portobellos, we'll get those stirred in and ready. So we get that started cooking, and we'll let that cook for a couple of minutes as it's cooking up here. Keep mixing it. Now you can see it's starting to brown a little bit. The flavors are all mixing together. Now the one thing we're going to add here is a little bit of soy sauce, just to give it a little saltiness and a little tang. So I'm going to give it a couple of tablespoons of soy sauce just to give a little more flavor to it. Mix that around a little bit. And then I'm going to add a little vegetable stock. And I want the vegetable stock to get absorbed into the mushrooms a little, so they get a little more flavor, a little bit more happening to them. So they're not just mushroomy. I like the mushroomy, but it gets just a little bit more substance to it when you add a little bit of vegetable broth. So I'll get that cooking up, and we're almost ready. I'll just let that cook on the stove for just a couple of minutes just to absorb as much of the liquid as I can. And then we're ready for getting it into the oven. So I just take a parchment paper on a sheet pan and then just scoop it off into there. And then once it's ready, I can put it right in the oven. So just, a couple of minutes. I just want to get a nice layer here to kind of get it started. And then we'll spread it around a little bit. So as I'm finishing up here, I just get the rest of it on the sheet pan, just kind of get it all in there, and then just spread it out, make it really nice, and get the one even layer going here. And then we're ready to get it into the oven. So I'm going to set my oven to about 375. I might set it a little higher, but I want 375 or so to cook the mushrooms and start to crisp them just a little bit. With the few ingredients we have in there, they should crisp up just a little, or at least get a little more texture to them. So while that's in the oven, I'm going to do one other thing, and that's to get some pickled onions going. I like pickled onions with my tacos. It just gives a nice flavor here. Pickled onions are really easy. I just start with a red onion. I have a little bit more than one red onion here. And because it's such a great accompaniment to have with a lot of different things, I'm going to make more than I need and just keep it in the fridge for later. But it's just a small slice, of onion, where I'm going to take that onion and I'm going to put it in a dish along with some apple cider vinegar and a little sugar. And that's it. So I'm going to put about a quarter cup of apple cider vinegar. And then I'm going to add some sugar to it. And then I'm going to put a little bit of water just to kind of fill it out a little more. This apple cider vinegar is kind of thick. It has a very distinct odor. So I'll add a little water just to make it thin it just a little bit more, make it go a little further. But you could just use apple cider vinegar if you want. That's fine. And I put my onions in there, lit it up, and put it in the fridge. The amount of time that it sits in the fridge will equal about the amount of time you're cooking the mushrooms for, and then you can eat it. So now we've waited about 20 minutes, and we're going to take our mushroom dish out of the oven. It looks really good. It looks nice and crispy. I think it's going to be great. I've gone ahead and used some bamboo steamers to take some corn tortillas and go ahead and get those nice and soft and ready to handle the accompaniment here. If you use corn tortillas, they tend to be a little bit hard in the shell, so I like to steam them. I just put a piece of parchment paper in my steamer basket, and then I just put it over on the stove over some water, and that makes some really nice soft shells. And here's what you've got. This is the mushroom dish. This is what it looks like. And then I've assembled a couple of tacos here with some sour cream and some guacamole and my pickled onions. Delicious.